Welcome to Passive Aggressive Income. This program may contain strong language. The content may not be suitable for audiences under the age of 17. We understand many of our listeners may not agree with all of our personal viewpoints. We in no way, shape, or form mean to be offensive to anyone. Our show notes will provide all of our source material included for each episode. Now let's get passive aggressive. Welcome back to another episode of Passive Aggressive Income. Yeah. I am your host, Mims, and I'm here with my co-host, Lexie, and she is going to run the show this week, and she's going to talk all things retirement and how to set up your retirement and how to build to that so that you're not just flailing in water when you're older and you don't have blinders at that point, like you're well prepared. So nothing's going to be a shock. You're going to be well prepared after this episode. So take it away.
Yes, thank you for the intro. So retirement, when you hear the word, you might roll your eyes, you might yawn. It's not the most interesting topic, but it's super, super important. Especially, when you get to retirement age, if you don't have any systems in place, if you have no money saved, that's a really scary place to be.
Mm-hmm.
So the sooner you start thinking about it, the better. And I'll go more into detail about that. But first off, we will start by talking about two different types of retirement accounts. So the first one is a 401k. You've probably heard this. You might even be contributing money into a 401k. But it is a retirement plan where a percent of your paycheck goes directly into an investment account. So this is typically run with your employer. So your employer may match part of or all of your retirement contribution of that percentage that's going from your paycheck into the investment account. I would say if your employer does match your 401k, then take advantage. Use the full amount. So if they match 3% of your paycheck, then make sure you're putting in 3% of your paycheck because it's essentially free money that they're just giving to you. So you want to take advantage of that. And if you listen to our episode two episodes ago where I talked about money tips, if 3% of your paycheck sounds like a lot, then reevaluate your budget and figure out where you can make space to make sure that 3% does go into your 401k. So when you put money into your 401k, those contributions are pre-tax, meaning they reduce your taxable income, but when you withdraw money from your retirement account, then the money is taxed. Versus a Roth IRA is a different type of retirement account that is not employer based. You contribute money however much you want. I believe the limit is, I think, 6,000, or maybe they raise it to 6,500 per year. So anything, you can contribute that amount of money into the account per year or less than that. I would suggest contributing the full amount if you're able to. You get some tax benefits at the end of the year doing that. And then these contributions are made with post-tax income. So presumably now the income that you have is going to be less than the income that you'll have in, say, like 20 years or maybe 40 years or whatever, when you end up retiring and you're taking that money out. You're probably making less money now than then. So this is great because you can pay taxes on your lower income now when you put money in. And then when you take money out, all the taxes are taken care of. You don't have to worry about it. So I would suggest putting money into your Roth IRA every single month. There's not a percentage of a paycheck that automatically gets put in there. So you need to be diligent about doing this yourself. And then once you turn 59 and a half, which is a super weird age, I don't know why they do it that way, but 59 and a half, that's when you can start withdrawing from your Roth without any penalties. You can withdraw up into the amount that you've put in before that age. You might get penalized, but any interest that's made off of your original payment, you will not be able to withdraw without penalty. So now that part's out of the way, those are just some of the logistic things. I know,
Right.
not very interesting, but necessary to understand what you're working with. So I would suggest using a retirement calculator, which I will link in the show notes. to determine how much expected income you will have by the time you retire. So what this means is if you start putting money in now, and that money is going to grow because it's putting into investment accounts, you can expect an average of an 8% return each year. So by the time you are 59 and a half and you're taking that money out, how much money do you actually have with interest? So to give an example, or a few examples, why it's so important to be putting money into your account now, the longer that your accounts have to grow, because they grow exponentially, the more money you'll have by the time that you retire. So this is, logically it makes sense, but I want to stress this point because the difference of putting money in now versus a couple years down the road is going to make such a big difference. So we'll start with an example. So say you start with saving for your retirement when you were 20 years old, which good for you. 20 is super young and you're on top of things if you're doing that. And then 45 years later, you retire when you're 65. You make, say, $40,000 per year. You never receive any raises, which is unrealistic. But for our example, you make $40,000 per year, don't receive any raises. And then, as is typical, you get an average interest each year of 8% back on the money that you put in because of your investments growing. So by the time you retire at 65, starting from zero, you now have $851,587. So that is a good amount of money. Good for you. Like I said, it's unrealistic that you are not going to expect any raises. Maybe you'll get raises, you'll start putting more money into your Roth IRA as time goes on. So you can realistically expect that number is actually going to be bigger. But for that example, say roughly $850,000. Now, for our next example, you start thinking about retirement when you're 30, which, is still pretty young considering you might not be retiring for like 30, 35 years. A lot of people might not even be thinking about retirement at that age. So say all of the parameters are the same. You start with a balance of zero, you're getting an 8% return, you make $40,000 per year, you never make any more money than that, and you put 2% of your paychecks into retirement, but starting at 30. By the time you retire at the same age, 65, you only have $410,428 at retirement, which is less than half. So I want to reiterate, when you started at 20, you had about $850,000. If you start putting money into retirement at 30, you only have $410,000 at retirement. And now to make matters worse, let's say at 40, you're like, I've been neglecting my retirement accounts. I haven't put any money into it because I'm young. I've never had to think about it. Now I'm 40. Maybe I should start thinking about retirement. So same parameters. Same income, same starting at zero, same interest rate on your investments. Now you only have 25 years for those investments to grow as you continue putting money for only 25 years. You end up with $186,165 by retirement. So under $200,000 to get you through 65 to the end of your life, where if you started 10 years earlier, you would have over double that. And if you started when you were 20 years earlier, you would have over quadruple. You'd have almost $1 million saved up for retirement. And so I think this point is so crazy. So Alex is the one who my husband is the one who introduced me to the retirement calculator. And when I saw these numbers, and we've shown this to a few friends too, like it just flipped a switch where like maybe retirement wasn't something I worried about when I was like 20. But now I try to max out my Roth every single year. I don't have a 401k personally because I don't have a job I don't have an employer. Eventually I will once I get finished with school, and hopefully they will have a nice 401k match. But yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. I think these numbers really show how much like accruing interest can have an effect on your timeline. So if you haven't put any money into retirement now, no matter how old you are, hopefully the younger you are, and you're listening to this podcast, you will start doing that immediately, but it really does make a difference when you start.
Right. And that's the whole point of this podcast, is that in order to set yourself up for the future so that you can live the way that you want, have financial freedom, that doesn't just apply for when you hit 40 and you're like, shit, I don't have to work anymore. That applies for when you're older and you don't have to work, or you can't work, or something terrible happens, hopefully not, knock on wood, and you're unable to work. So your passive income will take care of you. And that's why this is so important for a lot of people that don't understand a Roth IRA or whatever, because some people, that has helped out tremendously. And I think to depend on SSI is a joke. We don't know if it's going to be around for our generation. You know, we are about to hit 30. For the people that are younger for us, good luck. So just setting it up for yourself is the most pragmatic thing to do, the most self-interested way to plan out your future. And nobody has your back but you. So future or present you should have future you's back, because nobody else, the government's not going to really give a shit about how you're handling life at 80. That's going to be on you or your family or whatever the case may be. So make sure that you take steps now as a young adult, or even if you're a middle-aged adult. There's never a wrong time to start. And yes, you just described what it would be like to start at a young age, but it's better to start at any age rather than not.
Right. Exactly. And the thing about Social Security too is that it's not supposed to be like the sole income for getting you through retirement. It's supplemental. So for an example, I come from a family that has not been very financially savvy. And it's really unfortunate because my mom is reaching retirement age. She just turned 62 and has $0 saved for retirement. So she will be working for probably the rest of her life until she can't anymore. And it's really sad just seeing, you know, someone who has worked really hard her whole life and has tried to like make my upbringing and my siblings' upbringing really positive, but she's made decisions where she's taken money out of the retirement accounts that she did have and that her employers contributed to pay for her mortgage, so she wouldn't get kicked out of her house, and to help with moving costs and things like that. And when you're putting money into these accounts, consider it gone. Consider it like it is not being touched. It goes, and you don't see that for several decades. You just forget about it. If it helps to think of it as like not even your income, like 3% of your paycheck, you make 97% of your paycheck. You don't make 100%, because 3% is going into your 401k. And then I also suggest having money going into your Roth. So just don't even think about that as money that you can take out.
Right. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. And so just to give another example too, I'm so grateful for my husband for helping me. I feel like I've always been a little bit more financially savvy than like my mom and my sister, but I didn't know that like these resources were out there, like the retirement calculator. I didn't know how much of a difference that saving earlier made. So when my grandma passed away back when I was maybe, I don't know, I probably was 20. My aunt and uncle gave me $5,000 and my sister $5,000 from my grandma, essentially. And what I did with the money was I started a Roth IRA account based on Alex's advice. I was like, I don't really need this money right now. Like, I have my beater car. I've got my school loans. I'm doing all the things. Like, I don't really need the $5,000 for myself. So I just put that straight into a retirement account and totally forgot about it. My sister went and bought a used car, from a used car dealership, which was super sketchy. It had like over 200,000 miles on it. So it was already like going to be run into the ground, right? She put
Oh
that
my
entire
God.
$5,000 into this car, and I don't think it lasted a year. And then that
Oof.
was it. And I looked, I don't know, maybe it was like a year or two ago, just to see like how much money do I think I actually like made from that $5,000. And I'm pretty sure it tripled. I'm pretty sure it was like at least $15,000 now just from that initial investment when I was 20.
Right. Yeah, I've been in a similar situation where my grandma gifted me a really nice Jeep, and I'm like, yeah, this is a really nice Jeep. It had probably only like 12,000 miles on it, so it was like mint. And I'm like, I could love this Jeep. I could use this Jeep, but I decided to flip the Jeep and got myself a little ugly ass Scion, and I bought my duplex. So that has been paying me every month and will forever pay me until I die or I sell it. So um, definitely different approaches on
Yes.
how to use the money that is gifted or any money that you have saved up, and to
Mhm.
see how you spent it versus how your sister spent it. It's just ah.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's a lot, but I think that's amazing that you put that money into a shitty car and a duplex and like look how successful you are now. And I think that's really comes down to like a way that you think about money and the way that you interact with money, thinking in the future. And I think like the instant gratification that comes with having a nice car now is just not worth it, especially when you think about like this was something that like my grandma essentially like left to us, and
Hmm.
how like what would she want for us, which like she would want us to be successful and she would want us to have secure futures, and I feel like I successfully did that for myself, and it's just really sad that like that money is just like poof, it's gone
I
from my
know.
sister.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. And that must hurt to see because you can't do anything about it. So I
Yeah,
definitely feel
it's
you.
hard too, and it's like I'm giving advice to my
Mm,
family, like financial advice, and that sometimes they'll ask me for advice too, and I'll be like, "This is what I do. This is what I recommend," and then they will just like completely turn the opposite direction. I'm like, "Oh, it's so frustrating," but
I know.
ultimately, if you're doing what you are like to set your own self up, then like that's what more can you ask for?
And I think if you're on this podcast, if you've been listening, and this is the uh type of things that really just gets you off. I I think that throwing out the instant gratification out of your life, out of your vocabulary, out of your mindset is probably like the number one thing that you have to do before you start any type of journey that we describe on this podcast, because nothing that we do is for right now, it's for later. Like we do all these remodels for later. We buy these properties not because we want to live in them, not because we are gonna, get a whole bunch of money right off the bat. It's because it's going to set us up, and then hopefully 5, 10, maybe even 15 properties down the line, you get your dream house. But a lot of people don't want that dream house way down the line. They want it when they're in their 20s or in their early 30s. And I'm like, you haven't you don't strap yourself down yet. Like, you haven't even seen the world. Why would you want your dream house at that point? It just doesn't make any sense to me. But everybody lives differently, so
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like your goals change, and
Mhm.
maybe what I would have considered my dream house to be like, I don't know, 5 years ago is a completely different picture now.
True.
And so, yeah, just throwing away the instant gratification. And yes, our podcast is passive aggressive income, and we're talking about passive income. But passive income doesn't come easily. It comes with a whole big, huge history of hard work to get to that point, to get it running so it's passive. But it's not passive initially. Nothing that is like going to bring you long-term success comes easily and instantly.
Correct.
Yes, so that was quite a tangent, but to get back on track, so we were talking about retirement, and so 59 and a half to me, retiring sounds like a very, very long time for me. And
Yeah.
I'm not interested in waiting until I am 60 to retire.
No, ma'am.
So if you, for our listeners, are like myself and Mims, who are like, no way, I want to be done way earlier than that, then this is how you get your number down, your retirement age down. So if you want to retire earlier, then you can withdraw from your 401k or Roth, so 59 and a half. Then you need to make a plan for saving in a different account to bridge that gap. So say if you want to retire at 45, that's 15 years that you need savings to bridge the gap. Recently, I think in the past maybe 2 or 3 months, Alex and I ran numbers for ourselves and realized that we were really close to having enough money in our retirement accounts to let interest do its thing, grow exponentially, and then we wouldn't have to contribute to our retirement accounts anymore because we would have enough in there. And so we're pretty close to that. We want to have a little bit more wiggle room, so we're still contributing. But once we feel comfortable with the number that's in those accounts, then we'll start putting money into a separate account to try and get that retirement age down so we can take out money before we're 59 and a half and use that to live off of. So I would suggest that you spend some time figuring out all of the costs for the type of life that you want to live, both pre and post retirement, and then figure out how much you need saved for retirement, keeping in mind what your target retirement age is. So you can use rough numbers on this, but think about when you retire, what are your health and medical costs? If you're going to have a car payment, if you should probably consider ending up in a like assisted living facility. What does that kind of thing cost? Other necessities like groceries, toiletries. If you're retiring, I want to retire when I'm still able to travel. So I plan to take lots of trips. So make sure that those costs are all accounted for. And then before retirement, from now to your target retirement number, think about, do you want to buy any property? Are you going to have like a new car at some point, or maybe not a new car, but a new to you car,
Right.
Which I would suggest not buying like a brand new car. What kind of travel are you going to want to do? What can you expect your expenses to be on a yearly basis up until you reach retirement age? And when you retire, what does that look like? How much money you're going to need? So Alex and I did this a few months ago, and we realized that we were only like one rental unit away from Alex being able to retire, which essentially was not having to rely on his income. Not to say we would like not continue doing things, because we would always continue doing things. Those are the kind of people that we are.
Right.
He was going to end up helping out on the business with me. And then I kind of threw a loop in things. I'm like, hey, I don't want to do the business anymore. So I went back to school, which I am now, as at the recording of this podcast, I'm my second week in.
Woo!
I am now on a 2-year track before I get my degree and start working a job and hopefully make a bunch of money. And then at that point, maybe it'll be the opposite, where like I can support Alex and I for the time being, and maybe he'll start his own business, and we'll see. We're keeping our options open. But essentially, before that whole switch up in life plans, we realized that we really only needed like $1,400 of income more each month, whether that was going to come from the business, or if we moved out of the unit in our duplex that we're living in now and got either another duplex, or even if we got a single family house, the income that we would make on one rental unit would be enough each month to basically carry us through. We don't plan on like ever living in a super fancy house and living like super luxuriously. That's not really the kind of people that we are. So for what we could expect with the income we were making, passive income on rental units and all of that, we were pretty close to for Alex being able to quit his job. And during this process, we talked about, what does retirement look like for us? We don't plan on having kids, so we can't expect that someone's just going to like take us into their house and take care of us. So we need a plan for assisted living costs. And we're looking at like what are the, average ages that we might live until. Like my grandma lived until she was 92. My grandpa lived until he was 84. People on Alex's side maybe don't live as long. And so we're like talking through all these numbers to figure out like how much money do we need? What kind of time frame are we looking at? And it's very morbid. I cried several times. Like I said at the beginning of this podcast, retirement is not a fun topic. It comes
Right.
with a lot of like morbidity, and just because it's sad, just because it's morbid, just because it's like not fun to talk about and you'd rather ignore those types of conversations, it's not a reason not to talk about it. It's important. And I know
Right.
Mims would agree with me on this because she runs a true crime podcast. And just because these things are terrible doesn't mean that it's not important to address.
Yes. Yes. And that goes along with like setting up your will and how you want to go about when you die. So are you a DNR? Are you do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be buried? Where do you want to be buried? Like all these things, yes, it's very morbid to talk about. It's not something that you sit down at a romantic dinner and you're just like, oh yeah, when I die. It's something that you and your partner, or you and yourself, if it's just you, really want to outline so that there isn't anything that when you do pass, because the only thing that is certain is death. So you're going to die. Everybody knows that they're going to die. So make sure that you are setting up everything so that there isn't a fight over anything. If you are successful, if you have a bunch of kids, you don't want it to be left to them to figure it out. If you are in a vegetative state, you don't want to live that way, make it absolutely clear that that's not the way you want to live. So these are things that, like Lexie said, that we don't want to talk about, but it is super important because it's all about setting up for your future, and for almost like the worst case scenario. But it's not really worst case scenario because it is the scenario. So it's still something that you should cover.
Yeah. And it's not, I mean, if you think about, say you've done no planning, you retire, you have no money, now you're relying on your family to take care of you. Or maybe you die, you don't have a will in place, and now it's your family's responsibility to like work out the details of where do all of your assets go? What about like debt that you had, all of these responsibilities that you had that you didn't plan for?
Yep.
And now your family and friends are trying to grieve, but on top of that, now they have to like work through all these details, and they might be fighting and disagreeing, and like that's just not an ethical way to leave things. So in addition to proper money management, setting yourself up for success, you have to think about your loved ones too, because ultimately these things are going to fall on them. So that's why it's so important to discuss. So I hope that this episode sheds some light on why saving for retirement as early as possible is super important, not only for yourself, but for your loved ones, and for having a happy, successful life for as long as that may be. And I hope that you will start saving for retirement today if you haven't already.
Yeah, be smart and just do it already.
Just do it. Jesus.
Well, thank you so much for everybody who is listening. Thank you for the people that watch on YouTube. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and send us a message if you want us to cover anything that you think is relatable to passive income, or if you want us to dive deeper into a topic that we slightly covered on. We'd be more than happy to go over that and chat with you guys. And we hope that you stay tuned for our next topic of discussion for next week.
All right. We'll see you guys next Monday. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye. Passive Aggressive Income was written, recorded, edited, and produced by co-hosts and creators Mims and Lexie. We truly want to thank our listeners, collaborators, friends, and family that continuously support us for all the love we receive.
If you enjoy our show, please give us a glowing rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, follow us on Facebook and Instagram to see what we are up to. For any inquiries, please email passiveaggressiveincome2023@gmail.com. Episodes of Passive Aggressive Income are available wherever you listen to podcasts, so make sure to subscribe and like us on your favorite streaming platform.